guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I know I've been gone for a while and the only cause for that is video games. That's it. I've been playing a lot of games lately because I'm going back to school in a few weeks and I usually don't play games there at all, so I've been trying to squeeze that time in. Nonetheless, during this break I've been able to think a lot about the direction I want to take my channel in and the next videos that I would like to post and prepare, as well as I got to settle in on a few more thoughts that I had about two books that I'm going to be reviewing in this video. Okay, so I never expected to be really into fantasy until I read Jade City in September of last year, and from that point onward I realized that I really love fantasy. I love the immersive worlds that a lot of the authors create. I love the magic systems. I love how pretty much the possibilities are endless when it comes to these stories. And from Jade City, I jumped into a classic, the Wheel of Time series. Now, I had heard about the Wheel of Time when I was a teenager in high school. I remember that I actually bought Eye of the World because I always saw it when I went to Half Price Books, and Robert Jordan's his stuff would be all over the fantasy section, and I was like, who is this guy? So I bought the first book in the series, and of course, like a dumbass, I unhauled it. It's ironic that I picked up a series that is so intimidating to so many people in a year that was like last year, and also in the very same year that I had started reading again like I used to when I was younger. So yeah, I just kind of saw the Wheel of Time being discussed. I think one of the booktubers that I was following at the time wanted to do a read along for it, and I don't think that ever came into fruition, but I just kept going with the first two books in the series. I'm not really far in the Wheel of Time, and I loved it. And everywhere I go, all the fantasy booktubers that I watch, they're like, oh, I wouldn't recommend the Wheel of Time for beginners and stuff like that. But I don't know. I kind of don't agree with that. I believe that if you're willing to take on a series and read it in whatever time limit that you want to, the Wheel of Time is perfect at a beginning. And here's why. It's obvious that Robert Jordan at first took influences by J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings in the beginning of the Eye of the World. That's discussed a lot, but soon he kind of diverts it to his own storyline, and he apparently puts a very interesting turn on a lot of traditional fantasy tropes. Now, as a fantasy beginner, I probably would not realize that immediately, or rather appreciate it as much as a more seasoned fantasy reader would, but I still believe that Wheel of Time is very approachable because, for example, Robert Jordan takes a lot of time building up the world in the beginning of Eye of the World, which means that the story and the plot really doesn't pick up until the latter half of the book. But nonetheless, I kind of appreciated the slower pace. You really get a feel for Robert Jordan's world, the feeling of the characters, the feeling of his prose. A lot of big complaints about the Wheel of Time series is because he's too descriptive and he describes things that don't matter. But as someone who is a writer myself, I really appreciate when authors take the time to explain these kinds of worlds and whatnot. I also believe that that is a perk because when I was reading Eye of the World, I grew so attached to the Edmondsfield people. I literally did not want anything bad to happen to them at all. And I remember when I was reading that, and I was like, I feel so bad for the horses. Like, the horses, they all have their names, and of course they don't talk or anything, but you even grow attached to the horses because of all the drama and the madness that these young people, and then people that haven't really seen a lot of the world outside of their very small village, all of the stuff that they're faced with suddenly, and how they're the pattern in the wheel. Fate has kind of chosen them to be, the chosen ones. But what I previously discussed about how he takes a lot of time world building, and I felt like when I was reading Eye of the World, it didn't pick up until the latter half of the book. That could also be viewed as a bit of a negative. So I do believe that in the first, even in the Great Hunt as well, I had the same opinion that the pacing is a little flawed in some places. Like, I remember with Eye of the World, I was just fascinated with the world building, so I didn't mind how long it took. But when it came to the Great Hunt, I was still kind of impatient when it came to that first half of the book because mean, things obviously happen. You learn more about the world in The Great Hunt as well, but I still was just like, when's the plot really gonna come in? What is truly like the Great Hunt, right? And I feel like he does that a couple hundred or so pages in, and a lot of people may not, like that a lot. And I too felt like that was the reason why Eye of the World was a 4-star for me, whereas The Great Hunt was 5 stars, because the latter half truly saved that book. And another thing that I want to discuss as well is the fact that I think that if people are looking for very specific things in fantasy in terms of tropes and stuff like that, The Wheel of Time really does address for some of these tropes. Like, for example, I don't know if this is considered spoilery or not. I tend to like a lot of darker themes in fantasy. I love grimdark and all of that. But in book 2, and I'm pretty sure onward, things do get really dark. Like, really dark. And I was surprised by this because I was like, what? I mean, pleasantly surprised by this. Also, the fact that a lot of the monsters and antagonists in The Wheel of Time are really gruesome, are very horrific, and there's a bit of some horror elements in here. I believe Daniel Green did a whole video about the Wheel of Time monsters and how they're horrifying. I haven't watched it yet, but I want to soon. But yes, I believe this would fulfill a lot of the more darker lovers of fantasy, as well as the fact that this series very much uses the reluctant chosen one, or the reluctant protagonist. I feel like the fact that Rand is constantly trying to run away from his fate is something that some people may find annoying, but I found it very, very realistic. I love, by the way, I love Rand. I'm sorry, I'm a Rand follower. Who knows how that'll change in the next few books, but yeah, I really like the reluctant protagonist trope a lot. I think another mildly negative thing I have about, or opinion that I have about so far in the series, is that I think the magic is still a little bit confusing. Like in the first part of The Great Hunt, we have, I don't know if this is spoilery or not, but our female protagonists are going to the White Tower to learn how to use magic and become a Aes Sedai. I'm still not saying that right, probably. And it does become more clear in the second book, and I'm pretty sure it'll become more clear well onward. But in the first book, Eye of the World, it was really confusing to me in a way. But I believe that Robert Jordan does a really good way with reveals, with giving information that's not overwhelming. Okay, I think I just kind of want to hop into the spoilery section, a lot of the discussion section, because I feel like my previous parts of this video, I was kind of glossing over things and giving a very brief overview of how I felt. And so far, it's like 4.5 star series. I'm so excited to start The Dragon Reborn because of what was confirmed at the end of the second book. And let me tell you, y'all, that final fight in the second book was incredible. I cannot wait to see how they adapt that in the television series. It was just amazing to see, like, the heroes of the past come back to fight the Shan-Chan. Okay, I have so many thoughts on the Shan-Chan. What a terrible tribe of people. Like, don't get me wrong. This was definitely what I meant when I said that the Great Hunt got dark real fast. When I was first reading about the Shan-Chan and saw that they had imprisoned Aes Sedai, I was like, is this allowed? How is this allowed? Like, it was so intense, but I was very pleased with how intense that the series was getting. And then what happened to Egwene, that really broke my heart. I really want to see how, further into the series, how she handles what she went through, and if she's traumatized in any sort of way. I kind of want to see how that unfolds, but I'm really sad that happened to her. Poor Egwene. I love her. You really don't want anything bad to happen to any of the protagonists, but The Great Hunt, it got there. Even when it came to Matt and the dagger, I really hope things work out in that way. I don't want anything bad to happen to Matt. As much as an idiot he is, I still love him. I really love all of them, and I need Mr. Jordan to stop teasing about Nynaeve and Lan. Every time they have an interaction, I get so emotional. I ship them so hard. I don't even know what's going to happen to them and if they're going to even become a thing or not, but this is like the teasing of the fantasy romance. I love fantasy romance a lot, and I'm just being teased right now. Like, don't tell me if anything happens between the two of them, but I really hope that they at least become a thing. Even if it's for a book, I just want to know. Okay, yes. So the Great Hunt. Obviously, this video just became a Great Hunt discussion because I feel like this book really pushed it to the next level when it came to just the story and the plot and everything. The Eye of the World was okay. I did not get the significance of the Eye of the World until the latter half of the book. So I kind of, that's why that one was a 4-star in comparison to the Great Hunt. But yeah, so there is a scene in the Great Hunt where they're like they're chasing after Fane and all the dark friends who have taken the dagger and the horn. And there's a scene where it repeats 3 times. Rand walks into a house and he sees a scene of a family when they're eating, and it repeats 3 times. I have so many questions about that. I don't know what kind of magic or trickery or spell he had fallen into, but I want to know more. Listen, the way that they're setting up the Dark Friends and the Forsaken coming back, I am so hyped. Especially, what's her name, Lanfear? When Rand was asleep and Egwene and Egwene and Min were looking over Rand, and she came back. She's like, yeah, you guys prepare him and keep him safe until I come back. I was shook. I want to know so much more about Lanfear and the Forsaken and everyone else. And of course, I'm that person. I love villains. I love antagonists. So I'm just curious. And yes, I don't want anything bad to happen to the protagonist, but I really hope they step it up. And yeah, that is all I have to say really about the first 2 books and the Wheel of Time series. I kind of was hoping for this to be more of a review, but then this became more of a ramble. I really love the Wheel of Time series. I really hope that I can finish it by the end of this year. I will also be having another video soon talking about the 3rd and the 4th book when I finish reading the 4th book. And yeah, I just want to keep it going. It's kind of my viewpoint as a beginner fantasy reader and how I feel about the series. I'm really curious to see that once I've read more fantasy and once I've finished the series, how much my thoughts would change. Anyways, if you lasted all the way to the end of this video, thank you so much. And like, comment, subscribe perhaps, and maybe I'll see you next time.